SpongeBob is a franchise that I used to love so much when I was a kid. The classic show was my jam, and I loved the various different games they made for it and all. At a certain point, I just completely fell out of watching it though, and it left me behind. To be honest, for a long time I kind of figured that the franchise was surely just no longer running. It started way back in the 90s, so I figured it died off at some point. Obviously I was wrong about that, but I suppose it just completely slipped through my net of awareness. I do wonder if the show is still any good, but it has so many episodes that it's a bit intimidating to start up. Also, it's such a time sink. 321 episodes? That's quite a lot to be getting on with, and would take ages for me to get through. Anyway, I think it was the more recent Plankton movie that sort of alerted me to the continued existence of the SpongeBob franchise after all this time. I watched it a while ago and even made a video about it. I was truly expecting it to suck quite hard, but in the end, it was very funny. I mean, usually these types of spin-off films about a funny side character are gonna go up in flames because when they have to anchor their own film, they're no longer funny anymore, they get overexposed. See Cars 2 for reference. Just wasn't a good time for anybody. On top of that, I checked out the reviews and whatnot for some of the past movies from the franchise before I sat down to watch it, and they weren't that good. I pretty much always ignore the opinions of professional critics for these types of movies because I don't think they judge them on what they're trying to do, and they have a narrow view on what all films and animation should be. A more one-size-fits-all mentality. That being said, the audience scores were low for the last couple of films, so I was filled with dread. And Plankton wasn't the best film I've ever seen, but it was a lot of fun and worth the watch, especially since it was a made-for-streaming service movie. From here though, I suppose there's nothing else for it but to dive into the teaser. As with most of these YouTube releases, there's a little blurb that gives us something to go off, which is good because the teaser's very much living up to its name. It's a tease. It reads, SpongeBob and his Bikini Bottom friends set sail in their biggest all-new can't-miss cinematic event ever. The SpongeBob Movie. Search for Squarepants. Desperate to be a big guy, SpongeBob sets out to prove his bravery to Mr. Krabs by following the Flying Dutchman, a mysterious swashbuckling ghost pirate, on a seafaring comedy adventure that takes him to the deepest depths of the deep sea, where no sponge has gone before. So it seems primed to be a very generic sort of adventure film. Nothing wrong with that, as I'd expect that the plot is going to be far lesser to the characters and the jokes. Ultimately, this is a comedy film, and that's what's going to be the most important thing, that it's funny. The plot obviously can't be terrible, because otherwise it does become distracting and drags everything around it down, but I think there needs to be a sense of understanding that this type of film lives and dies by the sound of laughter. And that is what people are coming to see. Now we can actually get into the trailer properly and try to piece together something. Yeah, right from the get-go, I do need to say that I do not like this style of animation for this particular franchise. Don't get me wrong, I'm not a hater of the CGI style, and to be honest, I do think it looks good. I don't think it looks cheaply made or anything of the sort, but it's just rather jarring for me to see SpongeBob looking like this. I don't know if this is how the show actually looks now, but I suppose I'm just so used to it being a more traditionally animated design. Every clip that goes viral about SpongeBob is from the good old days, like the "Did you say chocolate fish?" or the "How many times do we need to teach you this lesson, old man fish?" Those clips always have that classic look, and so to see it in a different format is kind of wild, although it seems to have been the status quo for the movies for a very long time at this point, judging from the posters of some of the earlier films that I looked at when writing this. Hell, they had it in the Plankton movie as well, and even there I was a bit annoyed at it at first. I will say that over time I started to get used to it and eventually liked it well enough. I think after a period of prolonged exposure as I was watching the movie, my brain just started to accept it. But of course, nostalgia hits hard, and as soon as the credits roll, it's like my brain reset to disliking it and finding it way too jarring. I know that I did end up coming around to it in the end, but when I walk away and forget, I go back to those factory settings, and then suddenly it's just so upsetting. It's like if they suddenly made The Simpsons use this type of animation, when it's not the style you associate with the franchise. It just feels weird. That being said, even now, the longer I look at it, the more I start to accept it. But then again, I'm somebody who's easily overwhelmed by recency bias and who's pretty easy to please when all's said and done, so in order to keep my train of thought, I have to keep myself artificially salty about the animation. But yes, the style's different. Bad. I've always wondered why this type of thing often happens. Looking at various different film budgets, it does seem the CG style is actually more expensive to produce than the classic traditional look, so why do they use it more universally across film? Is it about marketing? Is there some sort of data to suggest that audiences are less likely to go and see a film that uses traditional visual style? I know that's certainly the case for claymation or stop motion, where the upper cap for a film is somewhere in the $100 to $200 million range. Nothing's ever really gotten past that level. And I guess when you take a look, you can see the same thing for traditional animation. The upper cap is legitimately around $500 million, with only The Lion King ever having crept past that zone and coming close to $1 billion. Meanwhile, the rise of CG animation has led to a box office boom for the animation industry. I guess from that point of view, you could then argue that it makes sense for them to go this way for the SpongeBob movies, because it's the best way to draw a crowd and hopefully get your film to make some money, instead of crashing and burning like so many others have come before. But now, back to the trailer. The thing I noticed more than anything about this teaser is that it really told us nothing overtly about the story of the movie and what's going to happen, which to be honest, I'm unsure about. On one hand, it's always been a bit of a trend in modern films to spoil a bunch of stuff in trailers, and by doing so, it lessens the impact of those moments and jokes when they do happen during the course of the cinematic experience. That being said, I can't help but think that perhaps things have swung too far in the other direction at this point. I mean, this trailer almost gives us nothing about anything that's going on at all. It's pretty much just jokes. And don't get me wrong, I love me some jokes, but hopefully they haven't pulled a Hollywood and put what they perceive to be their funniest jokes into the trailer either. That being said though, a lot of this is actually quite funny. Yeah, perhaps it's a little bit lowbrow and might have the critics having a conniption, but like with anything, there's always room for this sort of goofy and ridiculous antics. However, the more that I'm watching, and with the help of that blurb, I do think that I can somewhat piece together what's happening in this trailer. I mean, I could be completely wrong on everything I say, but, well, I'll give it a red hot crack to see what we can figure out. Okay, so we'll start off with this first shot of SpongeBob getting all shocked with his mouth growing ever wider and wider. In the snippet, it said that SpongeBob's trying to prove that he's a big guy and he wants to prove his bravery to Mr. Krabs. I think this likely means that at some point in the film, early on, Krabs is going to insult SpongeBob in some way, which will in turn leave him shocked, kind of like this. We then come to the little clip of SpongeBob shouting out that he's ready. This is likely once again, or towards the start of the story, seemingly in the same sequence as the clips of SpongeBob and Patrick dressing up as pirates and also blowing the horn, which I presume is going to be summoning the Flying Dutchman. We come to a scene of Patrick shouting out and laughing and leaping into a crowd of onlookers who all move out of the way, and so he crushes poor Gary. If you look at Patrick before he leaps as well as SpongeBob, you can see they're both holding a half of a framed picture with the words "Big Guy" printed on it. This is probably another scene that's set around the point that Krabs tells SpongeBob that he isn't a big guy, and so he decides that he's going to do something about it and go out to prove himself, whilst Patrick decides to go with him. Patrick also probably breaks the picture in his excitement and then goes crowd surfing with minimal success. Also, I gotta say, poor Gary trying to run away from the carnage. That gave me a good laugh, especially since there were so many bystanders that could have helped him in time. They all just stand there watching. Next up, we see SpongeBob walking along, probably going off on his quest and accidentally crushing Plankton underfoot. Before we come to one of the more visually disturbing moments of the trailer, when SpongeBob and Patrick burst out of a treasure chest in full costume. SpongeBob's in a classic pirate coat with a bicorn hat, and Patrick is in a truly odious outfit. He's got the Mr. Smee shirt on, with a hook hand helmet and eye patch that's been turned into a Speedo/mankini type of thing. Ugh. I'll tell you what, that is something I won't be forgetting in a hurry. I mean, it's funny, but also somebody passed me the eye bleach. At some point, SpongeBob's going to meet up with the Flying Dutchman and get signed up on his crew, as we see the shot of them on the deck of his ship with him ranting about them going into the underworld as they panic. We also see that at some point, Mr. Krabs, Squidward and Gary are going to go after them to try to save SpongeBob, as we see them in full pirate getup, but seemingly in a different ship facing down with some deadly sea creatures. As for why they decide to go and help, well, either Krabs and Squidward feel a sudden burst of compassion for their friend, or more likely, things that the Krusty Krab are falling apart without SpongeBob there to grill the burgers and do his job, and so they need him back. We also get a funny joke here of SpongeBob literally shitting a brick. Seems that this is at the Krusty Krab, judging by the floor, and so this is likely Krabs telling SpongeBob the way to be a true big guy is to confront the Flying Dutchman, or something along those lines. Something to really put the fear into SpongeBob, whilst also making Mr. Krabs seem really impressive for supposedly having done this before. I'm guessing that based on the scene of what seems to be a live-action Flying Dutchman, that he somehow gets SpongeBob to help bring him back to life. After all, he's a ghost usually, and now suddenly he's a man. In a subsequent shot, we see SpongeBob and Krabs both flying on a seagull, and then on a roller coaster with the Dutchman, who's still alive and not green. I'm thinking that maybe part of his method of bringing himself back to life involved killing them, hence why they seem to be pirate ghosts. It would also make sense as to why they follow him there, to try to get their lives back. If they aren't, and they're just painting themselves green for some reason to follow him, I'd question why, as him being alive would have no impact on them. We also have a scene of Krabs, Gary and Squidward already in full get-up planning their mission, with Squidward making a joke and being the only person in the room to laugh at it. Oh god, I love Squidward. I hope he gets some good moments in this film. We finish up on some general lowbrow stuff, but it's fine. That's how it is sometimes. The SpongeBob butt cheeks one did nothing for me. And then I was cringing at seeing Patrick's bare ass. Just why? Why, God, why? I suspect that this in turn is going to end up being some sort of fart joke. I think the pipe SpongeBob's holding is probably meant to summon wind currents or deadly spirits or something. Something that's going to lead them to the Dutchman, with Patrick not feeling the wind from within. I think that's the joke at least. This is where the trailer actually ends, and I think it was pretty good to tell you the truth. I rather liked it, and I think the movie itself is going to be a fun watch. That being said, I am curious as to how a SpongeBob Squarepants movie is going to do in the current era of the box office. I will say that right now, sequels and franchises are selling like hotcakes. You just have to look at the analytics for any of the major animated studios, from Disney, Pixar and Illumination. Hell, even the lesser studios like DreamWorks. Their best sellers, so to speak, are those that the audience is already familiar with and that they have a connection to. Nostalgia's a hell of a drug. But can SpongeBob manage to pull the crowds? The first movie managed to make $140 million off of $30 million way back in 2004. By the standards of today, that's a pretty weak financial performance, but not too shabby for back then. The second film in 2015 was titled The SpongeBob Movie, Sponge Out of Water, and it built on that success and showed the franchise could have some strength at the box office. It grossed $325 million off of about $60 to $75 million. A huge success no matter what way you slice it, but obviously not hitting those highs that we were seeing from the big players in that period of time either. In those days, billion-dollar box office were becoming commonplace for Disney, Pixar, and Illumination. Has the popularity of the franchise held up since then? No clue. Sponge on the Run in 2020 could have given us some sort of idea, but COVID scuppered those plans, and since then, they've only made films for streaming services, with the Sandy Cheeks and Plankton movies. Now, both of these movies did take the top spot as the most watched films of the week when they debuted, and probably lingered around in the top 10 after that. But this doesn't always translate to box office success either, so I suppose in the end, we need to wait and see. That being said, the numbers on the teaser aren't exactly hugely promising when you take a look at it. It has about 3.5 million views over the course of, 3 to 4 days? For reference, by that point, The Cat in the Hat was deep into the tens of millions. It does make me wonder whether the movie's going to end up bombing in the end. When does it come out again? The 19th of December? What else is coming out around then? Well, at least it's going to avoid the full brunt of the onslaught of Zootopia 2, which is going to release in late November. But at the same time, it's coming out on the exact same day as Avatar Fire and Ash. Is that going to make a difference for old SpongeBob? Well, I suppose SpongeBob is targeting a younger demographic, but Avatar is so hugely all-encompassing, you never really know for sure, do you? Whether it does well or not, I suspect it is going to be a fun time regardless. And so, with all that being said, these have just been my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What do you think of the teaser? Did you like it? Hate it? Has it got you hyped up for the movie? Maybe not. I'm curious for your thoughts. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.